We work with people to understand them to be more independent in the activities of daily living and be able to be more independent and supported. Occupational therapy is labor intense, and that's why many people misconstrue occupational therapy for just being a course that isn't very meaningful. The teachers have no patience. There's another 40, 50, 60 children waiting for that same teacher. So what would be the alternative ways of having this child retained in school? From an occupational therapy perspective, I'll use an activity. I'll give you probably a 2-staged activity, probably bidding. For you, bidding is just bidding. But for me as an OT, as the client is bidding, I'm checking, are they able to make a decision very fast?
Welcome to Daktari, where voices, perspectives, and sounds relating to healthcare practitioners and matters health are amplified. This is a podcast by Daktari Online, created for healthcare professionals across Kenya. Each episode brings you honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life stories from the front lines of care. Hello and welcome to the Daktari podcast, where voices, sounds, and perspectives of healthcare practitioners are amplified. I'm your host, Rian Hilary Kerubo, and today with me, I'm joined with Celestine Omondi, an occupational therapist and psychologist whose work focuses on mental health, rehabilitation, and inclusion. Today, we're going to delve in understanding what being a psychiatrist is, what occupational therapy is, and how it fits in the Kenya healthcare. I'm going to allow Celestine to introduce herself, to tell us more about herself, and get to learn more about occupational therapy, and psychology. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Kerubo. Thank you for inviting me to Daktari Online Tone. And it's a pleasure for me because we are amplifying one of those areas in medicine that is not very well conversant with Kenyans, and quite an important player in the journey of recovery. So my name is Celestine Omondi. I'm an occupational therapist and a psychologist, licensed by both boards. And I've been on this for well over 3 decades. And I've been practicing both in non-governmental space, public space, and private space. And I was at my last assignment in public space was at Kenyatta National Hospital, level 6, as the head of the department, and now in public space practicing.
So that is a great caps, and it's something that I've noted. You've said I'm an occupational therapist. While I was doing my research, I figured it's every time called OT. Yes. So yes, an OT and a psychologist, and you've said you've even been licensed by both licensure boards.
Yes.
Okay. So before we get too technical, because every time we hear these terms, therapist, counselor. Now today we're having now a specificity, occupational therapist. Up to when I saw your name is when I knew there was occupational therapist. Mm-hmm. So if you could at least define to us what entirely an occupational therapist does, and what is it now, what difference does it have with now psychology, and even the difference with other mental health experts.
Okay, thank you very much. Occupational therapy is actually a profession that has been around Kenya for about 60 years. That's when the first lot were trained. And it's a profession that came from psychology in the early 17th century. The reason is the people who were in asylums those days in Europe were sitting in jails and asylums without any activities to do. So occupational therapy was introduced as an intervention then for mental health, to help people in asylums who are sick, the aged, and people who are coming out from post-war. And so that is where occupational therapy started. So actually the background of occupational therapy is mental health. And that is why it is quite a key player in the mental health recovery journey. And that is where historically occupational therapy started off at. And so what does an occupational therapist do? We work with people to understand them to be more independent in the activities of daily living and be able to be more independent and supported. So we are doing what we call habilitation and rehabilitation. So habilitation, we are training you on new skills, and rehabilitation, we're training you on skills you knew previously and you probably lost them in one way or the other, or the skills you didn't have, but now we are training you to be able to adapt to improve in your activities of daily living. So that's what an occupational therapist is, and we use activities. And that's distinctly what separates us from the other mental health practitioners. We use activities.
Okay, just to get a pictorial view of what activities, if you could use an example, let's say, I don't know if the right term is patients. What kind of patients, or what kind of a skill would I have had that now I'm trying to get to be rehabilitated, if I got that right, or what new skill will I now get to habilitate? I don't know if that's a word.
Yes. Let me use Gerubo's profession, for example. If you happen to have had an injury today, probably a fall, and you broke your arm, and you need to hold your pen and have the cameras around you and work around them, and you have a bandage. And you can't have what we call, a fingertip touch, and you need it for your work, the fine movements. Then it's the duty of an occupational therapist to train those fingers, to retrain them, to be able to have a fine finger touch. And if probably due to the injury you cannot get that, then it's up to the occupational therapist to get you an aid that will help you in writing. So we have writing aids, so it will help you to do what you're doing. Or if it's a hearing aid, then we will be able to adjust probably how would it get to you to maybe fit it for you to fit. We adopt things according to the circumstances of the injuries or the struggles that the client has.
And now, how do you now personally navigate both roles? Because now there is being an occupational therapist and now being a psychologist.
Having been in occupational therapy and having been that the foundation of occupational therapy is mental health, in the early years when we started practicing in the 80s, we didn't have quite a number of psychologists, and it's occupational therapists who actually did the role of psychologists in hospitals. In Mathare, we were the alternate from the psychiatrists, the occupational therapists, who would actually give activities to clients. We didn't have psychologists. So it's from that coming off, you kind of find that the two careers are interfaced and complement each other very heavily. So for me, with the knowledge of a psychologist, we have an intervention we call the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave, what we call the CBT. And we use the same CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, in occupational therapy. But now, from an occupational therapy perspective, I'll use an activity. I'll give you probably a two-staged activity, probably bidding. For you, bidding is just bidding. But for me as an OT, as the client is bidding, I'm checking. Are they able to make a decision very fast? Are they taking time before they understand where the hole to put the thread is? Are they able to tie the knot? How long are they taking to do that activity? And how are they processing it? How are they putting the patterns? How are they putting the colors? What are the thoughts they're having? But because the client is not aware that exactly he's actually doing CBT, it becomes more easier than when you're just questioning the client.
Oh, so it's just like action beyond talking,
Yes.
which now makes it practical.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that at least we've now gotten the technical terms out of the way, but we will go back there. But before we do, let's know the Celestine before occupational therapy, and before psychology. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your childhood, your family background, and even your education, and what led you now to, have to choose occupational therapy and even psychology.
Okay, thank you, Kerubo. I'm actually born of a very large family, completely large. Majorly.
You say completely large.
Completely large. We are almost 30 children, and I'm the second one. And we are very many girls. So one is I want to just thank my dad, RIP, and my mom for having been very interesting parents. My dad was humorous from here to Timbuktu. So he would make humor out of everything and nothing. So we grew up in a lot of...
Hey, the Timbuktu was just it. Okay. Cool.
Yes. He was completely humorous, very humorous. Yeah. And being that we were the first children he had were girls, actually 6 girls before he got his first boy, and then many other girls. I was his man friend, quotes over quotes. So we would talk a lot. And then he would call me my middle name, which happened to be his grandfather, who he was a good friend of his grandfather, having been the first grandchild. So for some reason, yes, I picked quite a lot of how he had this. He was so nonchalant in his life. And he influenced me a lot in terms of how I looked at life. And then he happened to be in the medical field and worked in a medical institution. And we also were housed around there. So there was a bit of already childhood exposure and interest. Then as we were going to school, I don't know for what reason, I really admired being a policewoman. Yes. Probably subconsciously, I was looking at authority.
Okay, I told you there's more. Okay.
So everybody used to go who do want to go to school to be a police woman? I did generally, internally, that was my interest. But as I grew older, that wasn't sufficing. And everybody else was like, you could do legal studies, you could do this, but that wasn't me. I just wanted to be a policewoman, and I was hell bent. I don't know, probably unconsciously authority, because I was my dad's spanner girl, if not use the word boy. So so I had authority over the rest, though I had an older sibling, and probably it would could have played an influence in that, because there was nobody who was a police in the uniform in my family. So I went to primary school, then to high school, and I happened to be very good in artwork, really, really good in art. And actually one of my pieces was displayed in Kenya Archives for quite some years. Wow. And so from there, then things changed. An uncle of mine came who was coming in from Europe and said, but then you can make a good fashion designer. Twisted my head again. Then I was like, I think, that sounds, and it sounded gisty then, in the 80s. From there, it was completely expensive. There was only one fashion design school, and it was pricey. It was completely pricey, and it was in upmarket. So my dad said, no, who goes to school to become a tailor? So my uncle was in pain of explaining between the difference of a fashion designer and a tailor. So that didn't suffice. So after Form 5, I went into Form 5 and 6. I went to Form 5. But when I came back for my first holiday, then there was an intake for Kenya medical training. And I had applied, just after Form 4, those days there were no career guidance. You would figure out alone what you want to do. Of course, there were those traditional professions. You either become a nurse, a lawyer, a teacher, a doctor. They were very basic and very traditional, and that's what people knew. Why can't you be an accountant? But I was not numerical. So when I came back for holidays, then I found I was shortlisted for interviews for occupational therapy because somebody told me occupational therapy, they actually do art, and you're good in art, and you've won a national award in arts. Why don't you go into occupational therapy if you don't do your high school? Then when I found that I was called for the interview, why not? It was holidays. I went for the interview and I passed the interview. Those days, colleges, you had to do interviews. A panel of not less than 8 men seated around questioning.
Men.
Yeah.
Specified men.
Yes, there were few women in the field then questioning you one question after the other. And I remember that the year I did the interview, we had just celebrated the UN Day for Disability or something. There was a UN something with disability. And so they were asking around those questions, what would you do with persons with disability? What would you do this? Of course, that wasn't actually an easy subject because those were not things amplified in public. So I went back to school, but while in school, a calling letter came. We came for midterm. And I said, hey, where do people paid for reading? I think I'm going for this one. There's money and you paid for going to class. So that's how I ended up in occupational therapy. So as I practiced as an occupational therapist, in my first practice, when we went for the first attachment, the real exposure for what occupational therapy is something I liked because I went to Jacaranda Special School. And the first thing is it was children who are different abilities. And of course, that time the resources were few, the interventions were few. But the therapist I worked under was very passionate about being an occupational therapist. So she really influenced my just reinforced what I liked to do. So from there, I graduated, and then I was posted to hospital. And that's where I started. So the first hospital I went to, I found a department that they were not taking care of the children because it's labor intense. Occupational therapy is labor intense. And that's why many people misconstrue occupational therapy for just being a course that isn't very meaningful because you have to be at the level of the child. So we work with children on the floor. So people call it wale watu wa mchezo. And for you to be mtu wa mchezo, there's a lot of science that has gone behind that mchezo. And you want to make a child probably who has been born with cerebral palsy be able to hold up on their neck. And you have to do it through activity. You have to engage them before they settle and be able to engage with you as a therapist really take a lot of time. So you find that during that time, employment was being measured by how much how many patients you can see at a time. But as an OT, before you kind of connect with your client and settle with them, especially children, you'll have taken like even half an hour to 40 minutes before you start the real therapy. And then it's a long-term relationship because it's not curative that you'll come one day, get 1-2 tablets and you're fine. It's a long relationship. So you find
it has attachment.
Yeah, it does. It does a lot. So you find when you're handling the child, you're also talking to the parents. And then you realize these parents completely have issues. At times you're just talking about, oh, how is the baby? How have you people been since you were last here? I can see we are progressing. I can see we are losing up what you're gaining. What's going on at home? Many a times, mothers, I rarely saw fathers then, would break down and cry. And I would ask myself, what's making these parents cry? I didn't have skills in psychology, in terms of psychotherapy. Of course, I had the background of psychology, which we do heavily in psychology and occupational therapy. Then it was like, but now I can't start dealing with the mother and here is the child and the queue is waiting. So that started getting me thinking, what can we do to these parents? So it was a thought, but I did not actualize it at that point. So over years, when I moved from a hospital setting to community-based setting, then now I met the real world. I've been seeing a washed child, a clean mother, walk in with the child, but I don't know where they're coming from. So when I visited homes and I started off in the informal settlements, is when I saw the real occupational therapy with mental health challenges. And at that point is when I said I really need to help these people as a unit of a family, and I professionally delved into psychology. That's how I connected them.
You've already answered like you've merged my two questions that I was to follow up with. But then I already know where now that moment you knew that this is how I'm going to spend my career, doing how you'd want to spend, your career. And now you've mentioned very many scenarios within your explanations. There's those examples where you have to deal even with a parent. And I think, I'm not quite sure, but then you can confirm it later or now within our conversation, where especially now when dealing with a child and there's a guardian or a parent involved, as much as we are handling a child, the people who are also responsible for the child should also be part of that journey. If they're not also okay, they might either have the progress that you've made go back to zero, or if they're okay, it can improve, right?
Yeah. Okay. Hear you, Keribo. Definitely, the child belongs to a family or a community. If you do not empower the families or the community or the guardian or the caregivers, then you're not doing much as an occupational therapist from a facility setting, because remember, they're just coming in for 45, 1 hour, then they go home. Then you're seeing them after another 1 week or twice a week. Who is with the child? So in occupational therapy practice, we have what we call a home program. Give them home programs. But you'll definitely know parents who do the home program, because the progress will be fastened. You will see the child picking up. You'll even see the bonding during the session. So definitely the combination of having the parents or the caregivers come along, very, very key and important for the recovery of the child.
Okay. Now, you started by training occupational therapy, and then after some point, you now figured there's, for lack of a better term, a gap when it comes not understanding now other parties involved with your patients, and you're like, I do not have this skill, and you even mentioned that you didn't actualize it then. So when did you get that spark to now say that I want to now actualize psychology or psychotherapy?
That happened about 17 years down into my practice, is when I felt, no, we need to take care of parents. We realized parents had other needs other than this child, but we never used to think and consider the caregiver needs beyond the child they bring. They had other responsibilities, and they were really weighed down. And of course, at times, due to different personalities, people are yelling at you. Why didn't you come for your last appointment? Now today we are, that kind of language. And they do not understand that this person may be having other responsibilities. Again, it means when they're bringing their children to the clinic, they're missing out in a full day's activity. Probably it's an income. Probably she's a mama fua. Probably she's paid as a casual. Probably she's an industrial worker. Which employer will give you 2 days off per week? Infinity. They're almost losing their jobs. Some do, because of lack of understanding that the progress of children who are able differently is long-term. Some parents feel like, okay, let me stop working for a while. When the child gets better, then I'll go back to work. This doesn't happen. Then they are in a state of anxiety, animosity, because even you as a therapist, you're only able to tell, we would like to work on achieving head control, and then after that, probably supported sitting. We may not fully get into school systems, so we may need alternative learning. And so you find this information is not unpacked to you in totality at the first connection with the parents. So over years, when that was happening, I did education. The reason why I went to education is, while I was handling the children I was handling, you realize Yes, they may not be physically functioning, they have no head control, but their levels of learning and intelligence is intact. And just because they did not attain the developmental milestones, then the schools would not accept them because we don't know how to handle them in a school. So when I went into education, I was going with the mind that these children must learn. And this was out of 3 cases that were really disturbing. One of them was completely a very intelligent boy. He had cerebral palsy. You teach him once, he will reply back to all that you've done. And this was in the informal settlements of Mukuru. And I'd follow them to class. And he is learning, but he can't write because of his disability. He had a slurred speech. He eventually developed speech, but it was slurred. The teachers have no patience. There's another 40, 50, 60 children waiting for that same teacher. So what would be the alternative ways of having this child retained in school? So I started advocacy for including children in classes of mainstream learning because you realize there was an error in our education system that the special classes were put behind the main school buildings. That wasn't inclusion. That wasn't inclusion. And they would call it, we have an integrated system. But those children were left behind there. Some of them would leave class if they are maybe intellectually, disabled, just walk around the compound and go home in the evening. So I delved into education and did a degree in education for purposes of merging my occupational therapy knowledge to be able to have informed discussion around education for children in classroom setting. And I thank God because we started off the first inclusion settings in the informal settlements of Mukuru. We spread out, and when we saw it was working, first of all, we started off a creche, which would bring, probably I've gone too ahead. Before that creche thing came in is when I was working in the informal settlements of Mukuru. We would find children locked in houses because the mother wouldn't stay home with this one child. There are 3 other children who need food. They've got to, their labor, they're actually wage earners. What completely set me off that time was there was this big fire in Lunga Lunga that was triggered by a spill of oil, and many people burnt and died. There was a child who was deaf, and people were screaming, but she didn't know. The mother had locked her in the house. She burnt and died. That crushed me. What could we have done? She was a child among the cases we were managing because we had good well-wishers who would help us pay school fees for these children in other schools. So we said, what can we do so that we don't have children locked in houses? Schools are not accepting them. The parents cannot stay home. Other economic competing needs. What do we do? So we started what we called a daycare for the parents, by the parents. Had initiated that program. And so for the parents, by the parents, parents would come in, went talk to the local chief, and then there was a school there, which was not yet government. Then these days it is. Then we were given space, so we got a well-wisher who built the daycare. And the parents would come in the morning and get water for the use of your child, 20 liters barrel, and put it outside the class. Because the children were being changed from there, so we'd look for people to give us diapers, to give us clothes, and they would pay 20 shillings per day to take care of their meals. And the commitment of those parents was on another level. They did it diligently. And who are the caregivers? other mothers of the place. So we got a well-wisher who would pay the mothers who stayed in the daycare to take care of other children, so that we may divert the risk of leaving the children in the informal settlement.
All I'm getting is you got to fall in love with your career, and in every step you would figure something that is off, and you look forward to ask yourself, what can I do to be better in this? And hey, you've literally said there's a whole lot that you've mentioned in one. There's the story of the deaf child who maybe would have been saved if she or he would have understood, as she would have known what is going on around her surrounding, but unfortunately she couldn't. And now the initiative that you started, taking care of for the kids, the daycare center for parents by parents, right?
Yeah, for parents by parents.
Yes, and that is commendable. But then, if I could get to delve deeper in what you've shared, if you could mention to us, through your training and practice, how has it influenced you in how to manage your challenges in life? And yeah.
Okay. How do I manage myself? Because those are very high pressure jobs. Because you're listening to people, you're experiencing suffering, you're looking at people, you're saying, I feel helpless to help you. What do you do? So you're carrying this home also, and you're also influencing the people around you. I realize that my journey has influenced my family, not my family of origin only, but my family, my own family, in many ways. Well, let me probably share a story that now made me loop in my family. One time there was the Mukuru slum jumped over, what do you call it? The South B Road. No, actually, Uhuru Highway. And there's part of an extended Mukuru slum just behind Wilson Airport. It's called Wilson Mutumba. It used to be called Wilson Mutumba. It's an extension of Mukuru. And so it was a big slum also, with quite a number of residents, who were about almost 10,000. And we had clients there. So 1-2 client is too much to ignore. You follow them up to where they are. But we had more than that. So one day, it wasn't my day for visiting that particular family. And then we were passing outside, and the children were jumping up and down, because anybody medical is Daktari, and they were calling Daktari, Daktari, Daktari. Then I'm like, then I just happened to ask the little children who are jumping out there, where is mommy? Ati mommy is in the house sleeping. And I'm like, in the house? But this particular house was made of paper bags all over, with sticks and paper bags. If you wanted to know when Uchumi changed their papers, when a new paper bag company came into town, you'd get it on that roof and wall. But this particular day, the kids were alone outside. Then I decided, let me get into this house. She had dug it down deep, and I entered. Where she was lying, she had made something like a bed with stones. And on top of these stones was a cardboard. Around the wall is where she had dug deep. So I asked, why have you dug the house like this? If at all it rains, would it not be mud? He said, no. During the day, the sun scorches into the soil. At night, it's warm, so the children sleep around the wall in that context, because they don't have enough blankets. I was crushed. And at that time, it was about lunch hour. I was going to have my lunch and then continue with my afternoon work. It dawned to me how blessed I am. I'm even thinking of lunch. This house have not seen fire. This is a second day. But these children are happy and jumping. So we just don't look at the good things that we have. We look for what we don't have. And that triggered my thinking. I felt guilty when I would put food on the table. I would remember the families that are not eating in Mukuru. Particularly, this particular family was the highlight to me. And I went home, I would share. And then my husband told me, why can't we reach out to this family? We did. And from there on, we started reaching out to families. We are Catholics by background. So during Lent, we say we are Lenting for particular families. Then we'd shop and I would carry all my kids and we go and give families that we identify. So that's how it influenced my family.
I'm telling you.
Reaching out and
for you to be in that space and still it urged you to, be able to have a helping hand and being compassionate, which extends beyond now just career, professionalism and all that. It speaks a lot about your kind of person. And I believe with that, we'll come to an end of this session. But before we do, let's first, have fun questions. Mm-hmm. So I'll start and then you'll ask me a question too. Mm-hmm. So my question for you is, I know you've mentioned a lot of things that you had tried. One was being a fashion designer. You've drawing, and you wanted to even be a policewoman at some point. So now, because we are here now, an occupational therapist and psychologist, if you were not doing that, what would you be doing?
If I wasn't doing an occupational therapist and psychologist, for sure, I would go back to arts.
Okay, great. A question for me.
Yes, Keribo. I know I've kind of, in psychology, call it dumping. Have traumatized you? Do you feel traumatized by my experiences?
Well, some are shocking. I can't say I'm traumatized per se, but I'm trying to relive. Like when you say it, I'm picturing it, and I'm like, woof. It's heavy. It's heavy. Yes.
Okay. And probably in the course of your work and of your duties, have you been in a space whereby when you're listening to guests you've brought into studio and they're talking about their experiences, are there some of the experiences that you resonate with that they talk about? And what do you do about it?
Yes and no. Mm-hmm. So for the yes part is that see the part, like, let me resonate with your position, okay? Mm-hmm. So the part where I say yes. For example, when you mention the part where you put food on the table and then you remember a family where you didn't even see fire. I've been in such situations. So that is a yes. Where I might have questioned myself and maybe I'm too late or maybe I'm out of time. And then I meet someone who tells me of their story and we're even almost of the same age, or even someone who is older, but then you find that a condition has robbed them that opportunity to even be better or further in life. And I look back and I appreciate where I am because it's just by favor and by mercy of God for me to even be where I am at, because there's someone who is even older than me, but still can't do anything, or they can do, but then they don't have the capability to, because of maybe a chronic disease or something that happened in their lives or circumstances. And that's where now I can relate. It cannot be equal to the same situation that you might, tell me, but then it will remind me of a position where I also felt almost the same way you felt. And the no part is mostly I'm not getting vast into now the medical space, which I'm getting to really, enjoy is the word I can use, to get to interact and even understand life beyond just breathing. There's health, and sometimes you might come from a family where you just know some diseases like diabetes and all this, but then I get to learn of more others and they shook me. I'm like, it's not just what I had in the biology text in class. Mm-hmm. There is more to life. And diseases happen. There are those which can just happen to anyone. And with your experience, I'm still processing it though. But then I'm so glad that within it you still, found purpose in it, and it even gave you more urge to, look forward to making if everything isn't out. I wouldn't say the path was easier though, because from a place where you're coming from, I feel as you're calling it dumping, but I'm like, if I'm feeling this way, how were you truly feeling because you were there?
Uh-huh. For sure. Not that I never used to find it like a difficult thing. I always looked at the end goal of change life. I never used to look at it as is it a point of growth for me? It was never about me. It was about my clients. Have I impacted in their lives differently? It was never about me.
Oh, sour. Great. Now that reaches us to the end of this segment. That passion really shines through in everything that you have done, which we also yet to delve deeper in, especially the fact that you've mentioned more on children, adolescents, and there's some part where I found that that's something you've specialized in, but we'll get there in our next segment. That is it for this segment. We've got to get to learn more about Celestine. In our next segment, you're going to get to learn more about her and even her journey in, getting to deal with kids, children, adolescents, and more into the mental health space, because there's still other terms in there, ADHD, etc. And yeah, so catch us next in the next segment. See you then.